The massive station floating near Centauri Prime had seen many meetings over the centuries, but none like this one. The council chamber stretched wide enough to hold a small city, its walls made of crystal that showed the stars beyond. 12 different species sat around the enormous table, each more alien than the last. Counselor Thex 9 stood at the center of the room. His crystal body caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. The Vorthak were known for being careful and logical, which made his anger even more shocking to see. "Fellow council members," Thex 9 began, his voice ringing like bells, "we face a crisis that threatens everything we have built over thousands of years." The other aliens stirred in their seats. The Zalani delegate, speaking for billions of minds, connected as one, buzzed with concern. The ancient ethereals floated in their gas-filled chambers, barely visible as glowing shapes. The warlike Draknari gripped their ceremonial weapons tighter. "The humans," Thex 9 continued, "have become a problem we can no longer ignore." A hologram appeared above the table, showing a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked human colonies, spreading like a disease across hundreds of worlds. The sight made several council members shift uncomfortably. "Look at this expansion," Thex 9 said, pointing at the display. "In just 200 years, they have claimed 847 worlds. Our species took thousands of years to spread this far. They do it in decades." Counselor Vrak of the Draknari slammed a clawed hand on the table. "Their ships ignore our hyperspace lanes. They fly wherever they want, like we do not exist." "Their traders flood our markets," added the Malari representative, its shell clicking with annoyance. "They sell goods so cheaply that our merchants cannot compete. They care nothing for proper business customs." The Zalani hive mind spoke through their delegate. "They propose changes to our government. Democracy, they call it. They want every species to have equal votes. They do not understand that some are meant to lead and others to follow." Thex 9 nodded grimly. "Exactly. They question everything. Our traditions, our hierarchies, our carefully maintained order. They act like their 2 centuries in space give them the right to remake the galaxy." An elderly ethereal drifted forward in its chamber. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The humans are chaotic, unpredictable. They solve problems in ways we never considered. This troubles the natural order." "They are dangerous," Thex 9 declared. "Not because they are evil, but because they refuse to follow rules. They think differently than us. If we let them continue, they will change everything about how the galaxy works." The chamber fell silent. Outside the crystal walls, stars wheeled slowly in their ancient patterns. But inside, 12 species considered a choice that would reshape those same stars' futures. Counselor Hex of the insectoid Screeth raised a thin arm. "What do you propose? We cannot fight them directly. Their military is too unpredictable." Thex 9's crystal body brightened with satisfaction. "We do not need to fight them. We need to contain them." Another hologram appeared, this one showing technical diagrams. Ancient symbols covered the display, making some council members lean forward with interest. "The barrier protocol," whispered the ethereal. "We have not used that technology in millennia." "Because we never needed to," Thex 9 replied. "But these are desperate times. The protocol can seal an entire star system. Nothing gets in or out. No ships, no signals, no contact at all." The Malari delegate's eyes widened. "You want to trap them in their home system?" "Think of it as quarantine," Thex 9 said smoothly. "We contain the infection before it spreads further. The humans keep their precious Earth and can live however they want. The rest of the galaxy returns to proper order." Arguments erupted around the table. Some species worried about the ethics of trapping an entire civilization. Others questioned whether the ancient technology would even work. The Draknari wanted to know if the barrier could be reversed. "The protocol is permanent," the ethereal admitted. Once activated, it cannot be undone. This choice, once made, lasts forever. The debate continued for hours. Species that had been allies for centuries suddenly found themselves on opposite sides. The peaceful Zelani argued for understanding. The aggressive Draknari wanted immediate action. The Malari worried about losing profitable trade. But as the discussion wore on, a grim consensus emerged. Every speaker eventually came back to the same point. Humans were changing too much, too fast. Their influence grew stronger every year. If nothing was done now, the galaxy might be unrecognizable in another century. They do not respect our ways, the Screeth representative clicked. They want to remake everything in their image. Their chaos spreads to other species, added a Draknari admiral. We see it in their allies. Less respect for authority, more questions about established order. Even the normally neutral species began to waver. The humans' democratic ideas were spreading. Their trade practices were disrupting careful economic balances that had lasted for millennia. Their military tactics made traditional warfare obsolete. When the final vote was called, not a single voice spoke against the proposal. 12 species, representing trillions of citizens across the galaxy, voted unanimously to contain humanity forever. The Ethereals began the activation process immediately. Their ancient technology awakened for the first time in thousands of years. Energy patterns older than some civilizations started to form around Sol System. Within hours, the barrier was complete. Sol System disappeared behind a wall of shimmering energy. No human ship could leave, no signal could escape. From the galaxy's perspective, humanity simply vanished. The council members congratulated each other on solving the human problem. Trade routes would return to normal. Military doctrine could remain unchanged. The careful balance of galactic civilization was safe. Thex 9 stood before the great crystal windows, watching stars that no longer included human colonies. It is done, he said with satisfaction. The galaxy is ours again. But in the silence that followed, none of the council members noticed something important. For 200 years, humans had been everywhere in the galaxy. They had been traders, diplomats, soldiers, explorers, and workers. They had filled roles that others thought were unimportant. They had been the ones who mapped safe hyperspace routes through dangerous sectors. They had been the peacekeepers who stopped small conflicts before they became wars. They had been the innovators who solved problems everyone else thought were impossible. Most importantly, they had been the ones standing guard on the galaxy's borders, watching for threats that the comfortable interspecies never worried about. As the council session ended and the representatives returned to their homeworlds to celebrate, nobody asked a simple question. If humans had been doing so many small but important jobs throughout the galaxy, what would happen now that they were gone? The answer would come soon enough. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the things you take for granted are the things you cannot live without. And sometimes the people you fear are the ones keeping you safe. But for now, the stars shone peacefully, and the council slept well, believing they had saved galactic civilization from chaos. They had no idea they had just doomed it instead. 6 months had passed since the Great Barrier went up around Sol System. The council members had returned to their home worlds feeling proud of themselves. The galaxy was finally free from human interference. Everything could go back to the way it was supposed to be. Counselor Thex 9 was reviewing trade reports in his crystal palace when the first alarm came in. His assistant, a younger Vorthak named Gen 12, rushed into his office with urgent news. "Counselor, we have a problem," Gen 12 said, his crystal body flickering with stress patterns. "The Orion trade route has been attacked again." Thex 9 looked up from his reports. "Again? That is the 3rd attack this month." "The 5th, actually," Gen 12 corrected. "Pirates hit 3 cargo ships yesterday. The route is becoming too dangerous for normal traffic." This was strange. The Orion trade route was one of the safest paths in the galaxy. It connected 12 major systems and carried billions of credits worth of goods every day. Pirates had never been a serious problem there. Have the Draknari increased patrols? Thex 9 asked. Gen 12's crystal dimmed. That is the problem, Counselor. The Draknari say their ships do not know the route well enough. The humans always handled security. In that sector, Thex 9 felt a cold feeling in his chest. The humans had indeed managed security for the Orion route. They had mapped every asteroid, every gravitational anomaly, every hiding spot where pirates might wait. Their patrol ships had known the route so well they could fly it in their sleep. Get me the security reports, Thex 9 ordered. What he read over the next hour made his crystal body grow dim with worry. The Orion route was not the only problem. 3 other major trade paths were experiencing similar troubles. Pirates seemed to appear everywhere at once, hitting targets that should have been impossible to reach. The truth was becoming clear. For 2 centuries, human patrol ships had been keeping the trade routes safe. They had flown random patterns that pirates could never predict. They had responded to attacks faster than anyone else. Most importantly, they had shared information about pirate movements with all the other species. Now that network was gone. The remaining species had their own security forces, but they were not prepared for this kind of work. The Draknari were fierce warriors, but they fought battles between fleets, not quick raids by small pirate groups. The Malari were excellent at business, but their ships were built for cargo, not combat. The Zalani hive mind was facing an even worse crisis. Emergency messages had been flooding in from their colony worlds. Medical equipment was failing across their empire, and people were dying. The problem was simple but devastating. Zalani physiology was complex, requiring precise medical care to keep their hive connections stable. For decades, they had bought most of their medical equipment from human manufacturers. Human-made devices were cheap, reliable, and easy to repair. But now the humans were gone, and the equipment was breaking down. The Zalani had their own factories, but they could not produce enough devices fast enough. Their technology was older and more expensive to make. Worse, they had forgotten how to build some of the simpler tools because human versions had been better. Hive Queen Zex Prime called an emergency session of her council. The vast chamber where thousands of Zalani minds gathered was usually filled with harmonious buzzing. Now it echoed with distress signals. 17 colony worlds report critical shortages, announced one of her advisors. Medical centers are shutting down. We estimate that 3 million citizens will lose hive connection within the month. For a Zalani, losing hive connection was worse than death. It meant becoming isolated, cut off from the shared consciousness that gave their lives meaning. It was a fate so terrible that most Zalani preferred to die rather than face it. Can we contact other manufacturers? Zex Prime asked. We have tried, another advisor replied. The Vorthax say they can build what we need, but it will take 3 years and cost 50 times more than human equipment. The Ethereals do not make physical devices. The Malari want payment we cannot afford. Zex Prime felt the weight of billions of minds depending on her. How had they become so dependent on human technology? The answer was simple. It had worked so well that they stopped thinking about alternatives. Meanwhile, on the border worlds, an even deadlier crisis was unfolding. The savage Cathera had been contained in their home systems for generations by a combination of military patrols and diplomatic pressure. But the Cathera were patient hunters, and they had been watching for any sign of weakness. Commander Vex of the Border Station Deep Watch stood in his command center, staring at tactical displays that showed nothing but bad news. 3 worlds had already fallen to Cathera swarms. 2 more were under attack. His forces were spread too thin to help anyone. Sir, we are receiving distress calls from Haven Colony, reported his communications officer. Cathera ships have broken through their defenses. Vex closed his eyes. Haven Colony had 8 million civilians. If it fell, it would be the worst disaster in decades. How long until our reinforcements arrive? He asked. 6 hours, sir. But the colony will not last that long, Vex wanted to scream with frustration. 6 months ago, this would not have happened. Human patrol ships had maintained a constant presence along the Kythera border. Their fast attack craft could respond to any threat within minutes. Their intelligence network had warned of Kythera movements days in advance. But the humans were gone, and nobody else had filled the gap. The Draknari were brave fighters, but their ships were too big and slow for border patrol work. The other species had left border security to the humans for so long that they had forgotten how to do it themselves. Sir, the communications officer said quietly, Haven Colony has gone silent. 8 million people, dead because the galaxy had decided it did not need humans anymore. The crisis meetings began immediately. Council sessions that had been calm for centuries now echoed with angry voices and desperate pleas. The Malari blamed the Draknari for failing to provide security. The Draknari accused the Malari of caring more about profits than defense. The Zalani demanded immediate aid for their medical crisis. But the worst moment came when the mysterious Watchers spoke. These ancient beings rarely attended council meetings. They had been observing galactic civilization since before most species learned to fly. When they did speak, everyone listened. We warned you, the Watcher said, its voice seeming to come from empty air. Balance is not maintained by removing elements. It is maintained by understanding why those elements exist. The humans were causing chaos, Thex 9 protested. They refused to follow proper order. They were chaos, the Watcher agreed. But chaos serves a purpose. It responds to change when order cannot. It solves problems that rules cannot address. It adapts when adaptation means survival. The chamber fell silent. The Watchers had opposed the human containment, but they had been outvoted. Now their warnings seemed prophetic. Without chaos, order becomes rigid, the Watcher continued. Rigid things break when pressure is applied. The pressure is coming, whether you are ready or not. What pressure? Demanded the Draknari representative. But the Watcher had already faded from view, leaving only the echo of its words in the air. As the months passed, the problems only grew worse. Trade routes that had been safe for centuries became pirate hunting grounds. Border worlds fell one by one to enemies who had been contained for generations. Medical systems failed. Communication networks broke down. Economic partnerships collapsed. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. The humans had not just been random troublemakers. They had been filling crucial roles that nobody else wanted or knew how to do. They had been the glue holding galactic civilization together, and now that glue was gone. But the worst was yet to come. Deep in space, monitoring stations that humans had built and maintained began to go silent. These stations watched the dark spaces between galaxies, looking for threats that most species did not even know existed. If the Council had been paying attention, they might have noticed that some of those threats were starting to move. But they were too busy dealing with pirates and medical shortages and border wars to look beyond their own immediate problems. The humans had been the galaxy's early warning system. Now the galaxy was flying blind, and something very dangerous was heading their way. 1 year after the Great Barrier sealed Sol's system, the galaxy was burning. Admiral Kresh of the Draknari stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his fleet retreat from yet another failed battle. Behind them, Kythera swarm ships pursued, like hungry wolves, their dark hulls gleaming with weapons that turned solid matter into vapor. Admiral, we have lost contact with Battle Group 7, his tactical officer reported, trying to keep the fear out of his voice. Kresh's claws dug into the metal railing. Battle Group 7 had been 30 ships and 15,000 crew. Now they were space dust and expanding gas clouds. Set course for the Kepler defense line, Kresh ordered. Signal all remaining units to fall back. The Kepler defense line was Supposed to be their stronghold, a chain of space stations and minefields that would stop the Kythera advance. But Kresh knew the truth. They were just buying time before the inevitable defeat. 3 months ago, the Kythera had broken out of their containment zone with a force nobody had expected. Their swarm fleets moved like living things, flowing around, defenses, and striking at weak points with perfect coordination. Traditional military tactics meant nothing to them. The Draknari had always been proud of their military strength. Their ships were powerful, their crews were brave, and their tactics had worked for thousands of years. But the Kythera fought differently than civilized species. They swarmed like insects, sacrificing hundreds of small ships to destroy one large one. "Admiral," his communications officer called out. "Incoming message from the Council, the hologram." That appeared showed Counselor Thex 9, looking more dim and fractured than Kresh had ever seen him. The crystal being's usual confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like panic. "Admiral Kresh, what is your status?" Thex 9 asked. "We are falling back to Kepler Station," Kresh replied grimly. "The enemy has broken through all our forward positions. I estimate we can hold them for maybe 2 weeks. Thex 9's crystal body flickered with stress patterns. "That is not acceptable. You must hold them indefinitely. The inner systems are not prepared for attack." Kresh felt his anger rising. "With what ships? I started this campaign with 300 vessels. I have 47 left. The Kythera outnumber us 50-1, and their numbers keep growing. Then request reinforcements from other species." "What reinforcements?" Kresh roared. "The Molari have 12 patrol boats left. The Zalani have pulled back all their ships to protect their core worlds. The Screeth will not even answer our calls. Everyone is too busy dealing with their own crises." It was true. The galaxy-wide security system was collapsing everywhere at once. The Molari Trade Federation had lost 60% of its merchant fleet to pirates. The Zalani Collective was facing medical system failures that threatened to kill billions. Border worlds were falling to raiders and savages that had been contained for centuries. "There must be something we can do," Thex 9 said desperately. Kresh stared at the council member with disgust. "There was something we could do. We could have not trapped the only species that knew how to fight these monsters." The transmission cut off, leaving Kresh alone with his thoughts and his dying fleet. Meanwhile, in the depths of space near the Great Barrier around Sol System, something strange was happening. The energy wall that had seemed so solid and permanent was beginning to fluctuate. Dr. Vex Lai of the Ethereals floated in her observation chamber, studying the readings with growing alarm. The ancient Ethereal had helped build the barrier technology thousands of years ago, but what she was seeing now made no sense. "The energy patterns are changing," she reported to her science team. "The barrier should be stable for millions of years, but something inside Sol System is causing fluctuations." Her assistants gathered around the displays, their gaseous forms swirling with confusion. The readings showed massive industrial activity within the sealed system. Energy outputs were climbing every day. Construction signatures suggested building projects on a scale that should have been impossible. "How can they be doing this?" one assistant asked. "They are trapped in a single star system. They should be struggling to survive, not building." Vex Lai had been wondering the same thing. The barrier was supposed to contain a civilization, forcing them to live within their original system's resources. But the humans seemed to be thriving behind the wall. Worse, the barrier itself was being tested. Energy pulses struck the inner surface in precise patterns, as if something was studying the prison from the inside. The humans were not just accepting their fate. They were learning about their cage. "Doctor," another assistant called out urgently, "we are detecting massive gravitational anomalies. It looks like they are moving planets." Vex Lai's gaseous form went very still. Moving planets required technology that most species could only dream about. It meant the humans were not just surviving their imprisonment. They were using it to build something new. The truth was beginning to dawn on the galaxy's leaders, but they were too proud to admit it. For decades, they had seen human expansion and innovation as dangerous chaos. But chaos had another name: adaptation. While the rest of the galaxy fought each other with the same weapons and tactics they had used for millennia, humans had been constantly changing. They tried new approaches, learned from failures, and improved everything they touched. Now, trapped in their home system with no room to expand, they had turned that same innovative drive inward. Every asteroid became a factory. Every planet became a construction site. Every failure became a lesson that made them stronger. In the Zalani home system, Hive Queen Zex Prime faced a crisis that threatened the survival of her entire species. 14 colony worlds had gone silent, their populations likely dead from medical system failures. The hive mind that connected billions of Zalani was fragmenting as connection points failed across their empire. "Report from the Medical Emergency Committee," one of her advisors announced with the buzzing voice that showed extreme distress. "The situation is catastrophic," the medical officer replied. "We have lost contact with 18% of our population. Critical equipment failures are spreading faster than we can repair them. We estimate complete hive mind collapse within 6 months. For a species that shared consciousness, this was not just death. It was the end of everything that made them who they were. Individual Zalani could survive without the hive connection, but they would be hollow shells of their former selves." "What about our manufacturing efforts?" Zex Prime asked. "We cannot produce enough equipment fast enough. Our factories were designed to make luxury items and specialty goods, not basic medical devices. The humans always handled that kind of mass production." The bitter irony was not lost on anyone in the chamber. The Zalani had been one of the species that voted to contain humanity. They had argued that human industrial capacity was disrupting galactic economic balance. Now that same industrial capacity was the only thing that could save them, as if the military disasters and economic collapses were not enough. The most mysterious and troubling development was just beginning. Deep space monitoring stations throughout the galaxy were going silent. These stations had been built by humans over 2 centuries of exploration. They sat in empty space between star systems, watching for asteroids, rogue planets, and other hazards. But their most important job was watching the dark spaces between galaxies. Most species never thought about what might exist in those dark spaces. The galaxy was so vast that it seemed impossible anything could threaten it from outside. But the humans had been paranoid about such threats. They had built their monitoring network to watch for dangers that others could not imagine. Now those watchers were going quiet, one by one. The stations were designed to be automated, requiring maintenance only once every few years, but something was destroying them systematically. The few reports that made it through before the stations died spoke of impossible things: ships the size of moons, energy signatures that defied known physics, and movement patterns that suggested intelligence on a vast scale. But the galaxy was too busy fighting itself to pay attention to warnings from the edge of known space. The council sessions had become shouting matches between desperate species blaming each other for the chaos. Nobody had time to worry about vague threats from the darkness. In the middle of all this chaos, the ancient watchers appeared at a council session without warning. These mysterious beings had been silent since their cryptic warning a year ago. Now they materialized in the center of the chamber, their presence causing reality itself to bend around them. "You have upset the balance," the Watcher said, its voice carrying the weight of ages. "The young species served a purpose you failed to understand." Thex 9, looking more fractured than ever, stood to address the ancient being. "We removed a source of chaos and disorder. How does that upset any balance?" "Chaos is not the opposite of order," the Watcher replied. "Chaos is what allows order to survive change. You removed your ability to adapt. Now change comes whether you can handle it or not." "What change?" demanded the Draknari representative, Admiral Voss. "We can handle any threat if we work together. The fight." Watcher's form shifted, showing images of the dying monitoring stations and the vast shapes moving in the darkness beyond the galaxy. "The Devourers come," it said simply. "They have consumed 12. 18 months after the barrier had been raised, the Galactic Council faced a choice that would have been unthinkable just 2 years earlier. They needed to ask the humans for help. The council chamber was half empty. Several species could no longer send representatives because their governments had collapsed. The Malari Trade Federation was bankrupt. 3 Zalani colony clusters had gone completely silent. The Screeth were fighting a civil war. Even the mighty Draknari military was down to less than 100 ships from their original fleet of thousands. Councillor Thex 9 stood before the remaining delegates, his crystal body so dim it was barely visible. The proud Vorthak leader who had orchestrated humanity's imprisonment now looked like a broken shell of his former self. "Fellow council members," he began, his voice cracking like old glass, "we face the unthinkable. We must contact the humans and request their aid." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Some delegates shouted that it was impossible. Others demanded to know how they could contact a species locked behind an impenetrable barrier. A few simply laughed bitterly at the irony. Dr. Vex Lai of the Ethereals floated forward in her gas-filled chamber. "The barrier can be modified to allow communication," she said reluctantly. "But there are complications." "What complications?" demanded Admiral Voss of the Draknari. Vex Lai's gaseous form swirled with distress. "The barrier is not functioning as designed. Our readings show massive industrial activity inside Sol system, energy outputs that should be impossible, construction, projects that dwarf anything in known space." She activated a holographic display that showed the Sol system barrier. Instead of the smooth energy wall it should have been, the barrier pulsed with regular patterns. Massive shapes moved behind it, casting shadows against the inner surface. "What are we looking at?" Thex 9 asked, though he dreaded the answer. "We believe the humans have industrialized their entire star system," Vex Lai replied. "Our scans suggest they have turned their moon into a shipyard, enclosed Mars in orbital construction rings, and built structures throughout their asteroid belt. The energy output is equivalent to a small galaxy." The chamber fell silent. The species that had voted to contain humanity because they were expanding too fast had accidentally created something far more powerful than they could have imagined. "How is that possible?" whispered the Zalani representative. "They were trapped in a single system." "Necessity," said the ancient watcher, materializing without warning in the center of the chamber. "When expansion is impossible, intensity increases. You force them to build inward instead of outward. They became something new." The watcher gestured toward the display. "They spent 18 months knowing that their former allies had imprisoned them. 18 months wondering if you would try to destroy them next. 18 months preparing for the worst." A joint task force of the remaining council species assembled at the barrier's edge 3 days later. Ships from 6 different civilizations formed a small fleet that would have been impressive in normal times. Now it looked pitiful compared to the crisis they faced. The energy barrier stretched before them like a wall of solid light. But as they watched, patterns formed in its surface. The humans knew they were there. "Attempting to establish communication," reported the Ethereal's lead technician. Ancient technology came online as the barrier's communication protocols activated for the first time since its creation. The screen flickered, filled with static, then cleared to show a human face. Admiral Sarah Chen looked exactly like the humans. The council remembered, but something in her eyes had changed. They were harder now, colder, filled with a kind of controlled fury that made even the warlike Draknari uncomfortable. Behind her, through the ship's viewports, massive structures were visible. Space stations the size of cities, ships that dwarfed, the largest vessels in the Council fleet, construction projects that seemed to extend to the horizon. Council representatives, Admiral Chen said, her voice perfectly calm and professional. You have exactly 30 seconds to explain why we should help the galaxy that tried to cage us like animals. Thex 9 stepped forward, his crystal body dim with shame. Admiral Chen, we made a mistake. The galaxy is facing crises that we cannot handle alone. Crises? Chen's eyebrow raised slightly. You mean the Kythera swarms that have overrun 47 star systems? The economic collapse that has left 3 billion people without basic supplies? Or perhaps the monitoring, stations going silent as something approaches from dark space? The council delegates looked at each other in shock. How did the humans know about threats they had only recently discovered themselves? We never stopped watching, Chen said, as if reading their thoughts. Your barrier blocked ships and official communications. It did not block every method of gathering information. We have been monitoring the galaxy's collapse for months. Admiral Voss of the Draknari stepped forward. Then you know we need your help. The Kythera are destroying everything in their path. Chen's expression did not change. The Kythera are the least of your problems. Tell me, council members, what? Do you know about the Devourers? Silence answered her. The name meant nothing to most of the delegates. I thought so, Chen continued. Your monitoring network has been systematically destroyed over the past year. Ours has not. We know what is, coming from the dark between galaxies, and it makes your current troubles look like minor inconveniences. She gestured to someone off-screen, and new displays appeared behind her. Star charts showing vast, empty regions where galaxies used to exist. Energy signatures that defied known physics. Movement patterns suggesting intelligence on an unimaginable scale. The Devourers are machine intelligences that consume entire galaxies, Chen explained. They break down all matter into basic components and add it to their ever-growing fleets. They have already destroyed 12 galaxies. Ours is next on their list. The council delegates stared in horror at the displays. Some of the energy signatures were already visible at the galaxy's edge, growing stronger each day. The Kythera were not invading, Chen continued. They were fleeing, running from something so terrible that even they were afraid. But there is nowhere to run. The Devourers will consume everything. Thex 9 found his voice. What do you want from us? How can we make this right? Chen's smile was cold as winter. Complete autonomy for human space, territorial guarantees for any worlds we choose to claim, permanent seats on the council with veto power over any future votes concerning humanity, formal apologies from every species that voted for our containment, and full authority to coordinate galactic defense against the Devourer threat. That would make humans the dominant species in the galaxy, protested the Zilani representative. No, Chen replied. That would make humans the only species that might be able to save the galaxy. You are welcome to try handling the Devourers yourselves. The negotiations continued for hours. The humans presented their terms with mathematical precision, offering no compromise and accepting no alternatives. They wanted complete freedom to act as they saw fit, with the resources of the entire galaxy at their disposal. Some council members argued that the demands were too extreme. Others worried about giving so much power to a species they had recently tried to imprison. But as reports came in of more systems falling to the advancing chaos, resistance crumbled. The Kythera advance had accelerated. 3 more Zilani worlds had gone silent. The Malari homeworld was under siege by raiders. Most terrifying of all, long-range sensors were detecting the leading edge of the Devourer fleet. We accept your terms, Thex 9 finally said, his crystal form dim with defeat. Chen nodded. Good. The barrier will be lowered in 12 hours. I suggest you prepare your populations for what they are about to see. What do you mean? Asked Admiral. Voss. You imprisoned us for 18 months, Chen replied. That was 18 months of knowing that the galaxy wanted us gone. 18 months of wondering if you would decide that containment was not enough. 18 months of preparing for the possibility that we might have to fight the entire galaxy to survive. Her expression hardened. We used that time well. The species that emerges from Sol system tomorrow is not the same one you locked away. We are harder now, more focused, and we learned something important during our imprisonment. What did you learn? Thex-9 asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know. We learned that we cannot trust any other species to act in the galaxy's best interests, Chen said. We learned that if civilization is going to survive, humans will have to be the ones to ensure it. And we learned that sometimes the greatest threats come not from outside enemies, but from the fears and prejudices of those who should be allies. The transmission ended, leaving the Council fleet alone at the barrier's edge. Tomorrow, humanity would emerge from its prison. But the species that came out would be something new, something forged in isolation and tempered by betrayal. The galaxy had wanted a universe without humans. Instead, it was about to get a universe where humans held all the power. And with the Devourers approaching, that might be the only thing that could save them all. In the distance, the barrier began to pulse with new patterns. Behind it, massive shapes prepared for emergence. The humans were coming out, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The barrier around Sol system fell at exactly 0800 hours Galactic Standard Time, 18 months and 12 days after it had been raised. The Council fleet waiting at the boundary watched in stunned silence as the energy wall flickered and vanished, like morning mist. What emerged from behind it was not the same human civilization that had been contained. The first ships through were scouts, sleek vessels that moved with predatory grace. They were followed by cruisers that dwarfed anything in the Council fleet. Then came the battleships, massive structures bristling with weapons that made the galaxy's most advanced warships look like children's toys. But it was not just the size or number of ships that shocked the watching aliens. It was the precision. The human fleet moved like a single organism, each ship perfectly positioned, every formation executed with mathematical perfection. There was no wasted motion, no unnecessary communication. They moved with the efficiency of a species that had spent 18 months preparing for war. Admiral Chen's flagship, a vessel the size of a small moon, took position at the center of the formation. Her face appeared on screens throughout the Council fleet, and her expression had not softened since their last conversation. "Council representatives," she said, her voice carrying across space with crystal clarity. "The human fleet is proceeding to Kythera space to address the immediate threat. You will withdraw to a safe distance and observe." Admiral Voss of the Draknari sputtered with indignation. "Admiral Chen, this is a joint operation. Our forces should coordinate the attack." Chen's smile was cold as vacuum. "Admiral, your forces are not capable of this type of operation. You would only get in our way. Watch and learn." The human fleet accelerated past the Council ships with contemptuous ease. Their engines produced no visible flame or energy signature, yet they reached speeds that should have been impossible. Within hours, they had traveled distances that would have taken the Council fleet days to cover. The first engagement with the Kythera came at the Kepler defense line, where the remnants of the Draknari fleet had been making their last stand. Admiral Kresh watched in amazement as human ships appeared on his sensors, moving into attack formation with terrifying efficiency. "Admiral Chen, this is Admiral Kresh," he transmitted. "The Kythera have us surrounded. We cannot break through their swarm formations." "Understood, Admiral," came Chen's reply. "Withdraw your forces to the inner defense perimeter. Leave the Kythera to us." Kresh wanted to argue, but one look at the human fleet changed his mind. These ships moved like nothing he had ever seen. They did not charge into battle like Draknari warriors or attempt to outflank the enemy like traditional tactics suggested. Instead, they simply dissolved the Kythera formation. It was not a battle in any sense that the galaxy understood. The human ships flowed through the Kythera swarms like water through a net, their weapons picking off targets with surgical precision. When the Kythera tried to swarm individual human vessels, they found their targets had already moved to new positions. The Kythera had been unstoppable for over a year, their swarm tactics overwhelming every defense the galaxy could mount. But against the humans, their numbers meant nothing. Human weapons reached across impossible distances to destroy command ships. Human fighters moved through swarm formations like they were standing still. Human tactics adapted in real time to counter every Kythera strategy. In less than 6 hours, the Kythera force that had threatened the galaxy's core worlds was completely destroyed. Not defeated, not scattered. Destroyed. The humans left no survivors, no escape routes, no possibility of regrouping. Kepler defense line is secure, Admiral Chen reported to the Council fleet. Proceeding to eliminate remaining Kythera strongholds. Over the next week, human forces swept through Kythera, space like an unstoppable tide. Bases that had taken months to build were reduced to debris in minutes. Swarm fleets that had terrorized entire sectors vanished without trace. The Kythera, who had seemed invincible just days before, were systematically exterminated. But it was not just the military efficiency that shocked the galaxy. It was the scale of human industrial capacity that had been hidden behind the barrier. Supply ships arrived to support the fleet in numbers that defied belief. Replacement vessels appeared to fill any losses. Most incredibly, the humans began deploying space stations and defensive platforms throughout former Kythera territory while the fighting was still ongoing. Counselor Thex 9 watched the reports from his crystal palace, his body dim with the realization of what humanity had become during their imprisonment. The species that had been contained for being too expansionist had used their forced isolation to become something far more powerful. They are not just winning, he said to his aide, Gen 12. They are conquering. They are taking over everything the Kythera held. Is that not good? Gen 12 asked. The Kythera threat is eliminated. Yes, but look at the larger picture, Thex 9 replied, gesturing to the strategic displays. In 1 week, humanity has claimed more territory than they held before the barrier. They are not just defending the galaxy. They are reshaping it. The truth was becoming clear to anyone willing to see it. The humans had not just survived their imprisonment, they had used it to transform themselves into something unprecedented in galactic history. Their industrial capacity now dwarfed the rest of the galaxy combined. Their military moved with precision that made traditional warfare obsolete. Their technology had advanced by centuries in just 18 months. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Admiral Chen called an emergency council session as her fleets finished mopping up the last Kythera holdouts. When the delegates assembled, they found her standing before displays that showed the galaxy's edge, where something vast and dark was moving toward them. The Devourers will arrive in approximately 18 months, she announced without preamble. Their advanced scouts are already in our galaxy, which explains the systematic destruction of the monitoring network. The displays showed sensor readings from the galaxy's rim. Massive structures moved through the darkness between stars, their energy signatures unlike anything in the known universe. They were not ships in any conventional sense, but something more like mechanical ecosystems that consumed everything in their path. We estimate the main fleet consists of approximately 50,000 capital vessels, each the size of a small moon, Chen continued. They have already begun dismantling star systems in the outer rim, converting the matter into additional ships and infrastructure. The council delegates stared in horror at the scope of the threat. No force in galactic history had faced anything like this. What can we do? Whispered the Zalani representative. We fight, Chen replied simply. But not with the methods that have failed for millions of years. The Devourers consume individual species one at a time. They turn our diversity against us, using our different technologies and tactics to divide us. She gestured to new displays showing human construction projects throughout the galaxy. Over the next 18 months, we will unify galactic defenses under human command. Every species will contribute their unique capabilities to a single, coordinated effort. The Vorthak will provide computational power for targeting systems. The Ethereals will enhance our energy weapons. The Draknari will crew assault vessels. The Zalani will coordinate communications across the battlefield. "And if we refuse?" asked Admiral Voss. Chen's expression did not change. "Then you will face the Devourers alone, and you will die alone. We have no time for politics or pride. Survival requires unity, and unity requires leadership. We are the only species that has proven capable of providing that leadership." The vote was not even close. Species after species accepted human authority, recognizing that their old independence was a luxury they could no longer afford. The galaxy, that had once feared human expansion, now begged for human protection. Over the following months, the transformation was incredible to witness. Human ships appeared in every star system, establishing defensive positions and construction facilities. Alien technologies were integrated into human designs with stunning speed. Weapons that had taken millennia to develop were improved in weeks. But perhaps the most significant change was in humanity itself. The species that emerged from Sol's system was harder, more focused, and utterly ruthless in pursuit of their goals. They had learned that survival required constant vigilance and overwhelming force. They had learned that good intentions meant nothing without the power to enforce them. Counselor Thex 9 stood in his crystal palace, watching human construction ships transform his homeworld's defenses. The proud Vorthak, who had once voted to contain humanity, now lived under human protection, dependent on human technology for survival. "We created this," he said to Gen 12, watching human ships move across the star-filled sky. "We forced them to become something beyond our ability to control." "Are you saying we made a mistake?" Gen 12 asked. Thex 9 considered the question carefully. Outside his window, alien refugees were arriving on ships built in human yards, fleeing the advancing Devourer scouts. The galaxy was more unified than it had ever been, but it was a unity built on human supremacy. "We made the only choice that could save us," he said finally. "But in doing so, we gave up the right to determine our own fate. The galaxy belongs to